The United Nations is going through the process of reforms and which also affects the UNDP. As mentioned by the UN Secretary General, the UN will focus more on people, less on process, more on delivery, less on bureaucracy. So please elaborate on the UN reforms and explain what implications it will have for UNDP.
In 2015, the UN member states adopted a very comprehensive development plan, the so-called Agenda 2030, which spans over 17 development goals, covering all sectors of human development. So this Agenda 2030 requires the UN system to rethink how it provides support to the countries. So we need to do two things. We need to improve coordination amongst all UN agencies, funds and programs on the ground, but we also need to empower UNDP to focus entirely on development-related issues. UNDP was also mandated to look after the whole SDG agenda in its entirety. So we help governments across the board of development, starting from institutional development over to job creation, carbon emissions, human rights, whatever is needed to help making people's lives better. And we also have to ensure that no one is left behind, so that every layer and group of society is brought on board.
Your visit in Armenia includes meetings with the Speaker of the Parliament and other officials. So what are your impressions of these meetings, and what do you think are there any new prospects of cooperation with the new government?
Definitely. I'm very proud to say that UNDP supported elections in Armenia over the past years, including the recent ones. So together with the support and the cooperation of the European Union, UK, Sweden and Germany, and the government of Armenia, we helped to ensure the maximum transparency and credibility of the recent elections. So it was a pleasure and an honor to meet with the Speaker of Parliament to discuss with him how, in very practical ways, UNDP can continue to support the parliamentary institutions. We will of course do that in very close coordination with our partners and donors, but we want to look at how the Parliament can, in the future, even better engage or best engage with its citizens and national constituencies. As for the government, I'm yet to meet with representatives, but my aim is to discuss how we can support the government of Armenia in its reform agenda to ensure inclusive and sustainable economic growth in the country over the next years.
Armenia is celebrating the so-called Women's Month from March 8 to April 7. And this is the most important and convenient time to speak about women's rights. How do you estimate the status of women's rights in Armenia?
Women's rights. Let me speak about women in general, not only women's rights, because they are equal as the rights of men. And in 2013, I think the government even adopted a law ensuring equal rights and opportunities for men and women in the country. If you look at the statistics, 52% of the Armenian population are women. 56% of the population with higher education in Armenia are women. So a higher part of the population with university degrees are women. And this is reflected in what UNDP does in the country across the board, in all sectors and cooperations with the government, but also at the global level. Supporting women is not the right thing to do nowadays. It's the smartest and the best thing to do to ensure economic growth. Because women today are still underrepresented in politics and in the labor market, including in Armenia. If you look at the global gender gap, then you will see that we need a 32% increase of women representation globally to ensure gender parity. Armenia is in the lower half of gender representation. So of 150 countries that were measured according to gender inclusion, of these 150 countries, Armenia ranks at 98. So you see that we have some way to go to reach gender parity. However, over the last years, we have worked closely with the government at national, but also at local levels, and we have promoted over 3,000 women in local politics. So this cadre is a very good basis to start with.
What criteria do you think are the most important in deciding the status of women's rights in a country? How gender equality has changed during these years, and what are the challenges that modern women are facing in our nowadays world? We measure gender inclusion globally and nationally according to 4 main criteria, and these are inclusion in politics, labor, health and survival, and educational attainment. Now, women are less represented in politics and in the labor market in Armenia, but women are highly educated in Armenia, as I said in the beginning. And yesterday I met with a group of young women, tech experts, very energetic, self-confident women that want to participate in the creation of the future of the country. And given their high human capital levels, given their willingness to participate in the development, I think the country has a lot to win by promoting these women, and especially young women, to go into the labor market and to go into high-value sectors, so not into areas where they make less money than men, but into sectors like high-tech, where they can have high-value job and get promoted and eventually become leaders of the country. As you mentioned, the share of women's involvement in politics is rather small in Armenia, so we have only 1 minister in our government. So, in your opinion, what and who are the main drivers for success in reaching the gender equality, and what do you advise Armenian women?
I would advise the Armenian women to be self-confident and to demand from the government and the parliament to implement the national laws that they have enacted and the recent action plan that was adopted by the new government to promote gender equality. It is all there. You have the laws and the policies in place, but you have to make the government accountable to implement those laws and policies proactively, and to put the measures in place that are needed to include women, but also to reflect the necessity to include and promote women in the national account plan and the national budget.
The government has declared innovation as a priority, and how can UNDP help our government mainstream innovations in different sectors of the economy, and in particular in pursuit of sustainable development goals?
Armenia, and I'm very happy to say that, was amongst the first countries that adopted innovative approaches in development. In 2017, we launched, together with the government of Armenia, the very first Sustainable Development Innovation Lab. Innovation Lab means 2 things. We are bringing together all sectors that are relevant to developing new solutions to development, so people from the tech sector, science and technology, from the private sector, from the government, from diplomacy, but also investors and financial institutions that would then allow for swift implementation and realization of the found solutions. What we also do is we increasingly use behavioral insights and big data artificial intelligence to improve analytics and strategies to accelerate sustainable development in the country. And only yesterday I had the pleasure to participate in the opening of a 24-hour hackathon in Yerevan that brought together roughly 20 teams, young teams of men and women, that are now looking at smart solutions to reduce pollution, improve waste management, urban gardening, green spaces in the cities of Armenia. And I'm curious to see later today to see what they have come up with, and then also to hear from our institutional partners as to what degree they are prepared to help them implement and scale the found solutions. And there are some very good experiences from the past, and I'm sure that we can do more. Also in line with the global policy of UNDP. UNDP itself is undergoing a digital transformation. This is part and parcel what we do, also at the global level. So Armenia is not only the first country that helped us launch this type of development cooperation at the national level, but is now also leading as an example for over 60 countries in which we have established such labs in the meantime, and we hope to scale it further to reach global coverage. Okay. Thank you very much.